say his next Sunday or whenever.
Okay, welcome to First Universalist out of New Madison. As most of you probably know, this is Fair Week in Greenville for Dark County. And I'm assuming, for those at home, I'm assuming everybody went to the fair. Because they aren't here. Which is okay. It'll be on Facebook if they want to watch it later, and on YouTube. It's also we got on YouTube channel. So we may skim through this a little quicker so we can get out and we can all go to the fair. And I don't know, do they have a church service at the fair? We used to.
I think so.
I was looking at the program, I don't remember seeing that. So, do we have any announcements?
Big night of racing.
Tonight is racing.
Yeah.
I've got two horses in, Chick Magnet and Racing Rebel. And I don't know, I haven't seen the card yet, the racing card, so I don't know when they are. Races start at 6:30. So I'll be there at 6:30, or I'll be there a little early to find out what the card is. Hopefully I don't get
12 television sets, too.
What is it?
12 television sets.
12 television.
70-inch TVs. They're giving away 12 50-inch TVs. Yeah.
Wow.
You have to be there to play it, so it's going to keep the crowd there until the end, probably.
Of the harness races?
Yeah.
Huh. Of course, that used to be pretty impressive, but you can go to Walmart now and get a 50-inch television set for a couple $100.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought about it because, you know, we have what I always thought was a giant screen TV, and it's nowhere near like that.
Yeah.
And for a couple $100, I mean, might as well watch movies at home. All right, any other announcements?
Just to share that one of our congregants, Lou Reprovic, and his wife Denise are in Washington. We wish them the best trip. And he sends his regards and says he'll send us very soon.
Hi, Margaret.
Very soon. And he said he had a great experience visiting a Buddhist temple, led with a service meditation by 6 Buddhist monks. And so he has one's own path. Do you way.
Good.
He sends us
Excellent.
his regards.
And October the 10th, I think it's the 10th, we're having our co-meeting with El Dorado at the park. September the 10th in New Madison area. That's coming up pretty quick. And we'll have we'll provide all the basics for everything. Some kind of a crock pot, and cold meat, sandwiches, chips, desserts. So you don't have to bring anything. You're more than welcome to bring something if you have something you'd like to bring to carry in, but you don't have to. Everything will be provided.
And Reverend Derek Parker will be leading our brief service this week. On that day.
Yes, Derek will be giving the homily and basically leading the service. And he can sing pretty good a cappella, so we may even have some singing. Right, anything else? All right, our prelude is Lover Come Back to Me. All right, our chalice lighting, Connection and Commitment by Cynthia Landrum. As we kindle this flame, may it spark in each of us connection and commitment to this living tradition and to each other. Our opening hymn is 39, Bring, O Lord, Thy Music. All right, our topic today is state and religion. The state, United States, and religion, the place that it takes, that religion has in the formation and the continuation of the United States of America. There's been some controversy, so we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. And I kind of got sidetracked, as is usual for me in doing my research, by some of the things that are happening in Florida, so that's what we'll talk about. Affirmation, for every time we make a mistake, by Maureen Hilleran. For every time we make a mistake and we decide to start again, we light this chalice. For every time we are lonely and we let someone be our friend, we light this chalice. Think about that. For every time we are lonely and let someone be our friend, you have to be willing to accept help. For every time we are disappointed and we choose to hope, we light this chalice. Right, joys and concerns. Roberta, we talked to her on the phone. She was going to be here, has her cast off, said she's able to play again, but she's not here. So she called Lloyd, said that she wasn't coming, but she didn't really give a reason why. So I don't know if she just didn't feel steady today having the cast off. When I talked to her on the phone, I told her, be careful, because most accidents happen within a half a mile of home, and that's where hers happen. Nice to see Cecil with us today. Are you doing okay? Okay, cross your fingers. I went to Lonnie Valentine's funeral yesterday. However many I think you're aware that Lonnie died suddenly. He just retired and didn't have time to do anything after his retirement. before he got a sudden onset of brain cancer. Died within just a few months of the diagnosis. It was a Quaker funeral. I've never been to a Quaker funeral before. It's pretty impressive if you've ever been there. And this was at West Friends Quaker Church, which is down there by Earlham School of Religion and Earlham College and Bethany Seminary. They have a, not Facebook, what's the thing where you look on your computer and contribute to the service. It's not, this is where they actually have a big thing on the wall with everybody's picture from California, from all over the United States, from overseas, where their picture was there and they were watching the service and they could actually talk. It's not Facebook, but it's another, whatever the name of it is. And a lot of churches, what is it?
Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom. They have a big Zoom thing set up, so everybody in the church can see the Zoom, can see the people who are watching on Zoom, so it's just like they're there in church with you, and you can hear them when they speak. Quakers are pretty amazing. They didn't really have a sermon presentation. It's a time of quiet when people can voice their own reflections and their own thoughts, and that went on. It was a 2-hour service. My back was starting to hurt by the end of the service. But the Quakers are intelligent, broad-minded, expressive people. And one story that really stuck with me that I'm going to share with you. Lonnie came from California when he came to Indiana, and he was the peace activist, the peace professor at the Earlham School of Religion. Very active in the community, and everybody really liked Lonnie, and he helped everybody from all walks of life, and all these people testified. But one of them told a story that when Lonnie was in California, a friend of his was doing the swim from San Diego, whatever town it is, to Catalina Island. You're familiar with Catalina Island, it's off the coast, and it's a fairly decent swim through the Pacific Ocean. And for some reason, she was doing it at night. I don't know if the seas are calmer at night or whatever else, but she had a boat that came along with her, with the pilot in the boat, and Lonnie and 2 other guys. And Lonnie actually got in the water and swam with her in the middle of the night to keep her company. And the person he was telling the story to said, "What were the people in the boat?" And he said, "Well, one of them was the observer, and the other guy had the gun." And she said, "Gun? Why would a guy in a boat have the gun?" And she said, "To shoot the sharks." To shoot the sharks. So Lonnie is the kind of friend that will swim with you in the dark in shark-infested waters. That's the kind of guy Lonnie was. Okay.
That speaks so highly of him as well. If you've not yet had an opportunity on our bulletin board back here, we received a very touching note from his wife based on the card that we had sent him shortly after his diagnosis.
Yes.
And I would encourage you to read that. It's very reflective, and it certainly attests to his wonderful life that he did in
Actually,
his brief life.
the card is back there, and remind me after church, I'll take a picture of it and we'll post it on Facebook for the people who don't come to church and can't see it. He and his wife were a perfect match. She was just as caring, just as sharing, and just as nice a person, and his kids as well are just as nice a people as Lonnie was. So it was a match made in heaven there. It was just a really impressive service. You can talk to me later about it. The Quakers are kind of, like I say, they're interesting people. They're educated, and they have a real presence and a real sense of drama. The whole service was enjoyable to be to. All right. Joys and concerns. We talked about Lonnie. Oh, Maui. I meant to put up, how many people know what the Hawaiian flag looks like? You see the Hawaiian flag? The Hawaiian flag, I took a picture of it, but I didn't have a chance to stick it up on the screen. The Hawaiian flag looks like the British Union Jack. You know, the blue and the white bars with the X, the cross in the middle. And I don't know why they said, I looked up the history of it, and they said from the history of all the people who had landed in Hawaii, they kind of put them all together. But I don't think the British were particularly prominent in the people who explored Hawaii. But whatever, I'll bring the picture the next time, because Hawaii is going to be in our presence for quite a while. Lahani, I think is the name of the town, was completely wiped off the map. There is a lot of controversy going on about why the sirens weren't sounded. And like any other story, There are two sides to everything. The man in charge of sounding the sirens, his understanding, his reasoning was this. Those sirens are there to warn people of tsunamis. That is the biggest danger in Hawaii. Not fire, but tsunamis. And when those sirens go off in the middle of the night, what do people instinctively do? They get in their cars and they head up the mountain. Where was the fire coming from? Up the mountain. And the sirens don't give you instructions, they just have a siren. He was afraid that if they sounded the sirens, people would turn and panic and run up right into the fire. That may not be the right decision, but I understand his decision. And he's resigned because of all of the criticism he's getting. But like any other public disaster, people criticize, you did this, you didn't do this. Somebody always criticizes everything. Nobody ever says you did the right thing. They're complaining that the government is not supporting people well enough. The roads were all closed. They don't want people back in the town. Over 1,000 people are listed as missing, and they've only declared 111 or 112 as being found.
The last news that I heard last night was they only have 20% area left to
search.
I imagine and guessing that maybe those people are not really, if they were in a disaster, that they just haven't
Haven't
contacted.
found them yet. Well, what worries me is how many of them jumped in the ocean
Yeah.
and disappeared, and they aren't going to find their
That's
bodies.
true.
So I think what they're doing is trying to everybody who's missing a relative or a friend or a neighbor is put their name on the list. But I also heard someone say we made the list of missing a lot higher because we don't want to be accused of losing someone. So it could turn out to the end that maybe only 100 or 200 people will have died and nobody else is missing. So everything is still up in the air, which is what happens in a disaster. So Ukraine, my sunflower is getting pretty bedraggled. I'm not sure. It's been out in the sun and I've been watering it. Maybe the pot's too small, or maybe I need to start fertilizing it. But I think it's kind of indicative of what is going on in Ukraine. They are looking pretty bedraggled too. The latest Russian attack in a town whose name I can't pronounce was done at the courthouse, or the civic center in the middle of town. While people were gathered in the middle of town on shopping day on Saturday, 7 people killed, including a 6-year-old child, and then a bunch of adults, and hundreds of people injured by flying shrapnel. This is going on and on and on, and it doesn't seem like there's a resolution anywhere in sight. All right. Do we have any other joys and concerns? Okay, one more candle for those joys and concerns that you voice or are not able to voice. I guess let me throw in another one. One of the guys I work with has not showed up for work for 2 weeks, said he was sick. Then he asked to borrow $300 to fix his car and said he'll work it off. I'm kind of coming to the end of my rope with some of these people. I don't really have, so I'm going to light a candle for Joey. But I don't mind loaning him money, but I would really like for him to work and pay it off, not to just kind of disappear. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. But keep Joey in your thought. And Joey has a family, has a wife, has 3 kids, and lives in one of my houses, which he's not paying rent for either. So we'll have to see what goes on there. Okay, that's our joys and concerns. Our children's story is, I'm going to read that to you. And this is kind of a different one. But I had 2 friends, I guess I should have put them in joys and concerns. My brother's dog died last week. He's had that dog for 13 years. He's in Florida, and he said the dog just wasn't eating very good that night. They took him to the vet the next day, and he was dead by the next night, so they're not really sure what happened to him. But it really shook him up. He's retired, living in Florida. I said, well, there's nothing to replace a dog that you've lost, like a new puppy. And he said, well, we don't want to have another dog. We don't want to go through that again. I don't really understand that. I really don't, because we've had 5 Labradors. We're on our 5th one now. There's nothing like a puppy in your house to keep you young, keep you on your feet or on your toes. And my friend Lisa from Dayton, her dog died this week. And she's had that dog for almost 18 years. So I sent both of them this picture and this little reading. And and this applies to our religion that we're talking about today. A man and his dog were walking along a road. The man was enjoying the scenery when suddenly it occurred to him that he was dead. He remembered dying and that the dog walking beside him had been dead for years. He wondered where the road was leading them. After a while, they came to a high white stone wall along one side of the road. It looked like fine marble. At the top of a long hill, it was broken by a tall arch that glowed in the sunlight. When he was standing before it, he saw a magnificent gate in the arch that looked like mother of pearl, and the street that led to the gate looked like pure gold. He and the dog walked toward the gate, and as he got closer, he saw a man at a desk to one side. When he was close enough, he called out, "Excuse me, where are we?" "This is heaven, sir," the man answered. "Would you happen to have some water?" the man asked. "Of course, sir. Come right in, and I'll have some ice water brought right up." The man gestured, and the gate began to open. "Can my friend," gesturing to his dog, "come in too?" the traveler asked. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't accept pets." The man thought a moment and then turned back toward the road and continued the way he had been going with his dog. After another long walk and at the top of another long hill, he came to a dirt road leading through a farm gate that looked as if it had never been closed. There was no fence. As he approached the gate, he saw a man inside, leaning against a tree, reading a book. "Excuse me," he called to the man. "Do you have any water?" "Sure, yeah. There's a pump over there. Come on in." "How about my friend here?" the traveler gestured to his dog. "There should be a bowl by the pump." They went through the gate, and sure enough, there was an old-fashioned hand pump with a bowl beside it. The traveler filled the water bowl and took a long drink himself, and then he gave some to the dog. When they were full, he and the dog walked back toward the man who was standing by the tree. "What do you call this place?" the traveler asked. "This is heaven," he answered. "Well, that's confusing," the traveler said. The man down the road said that was heaven too. "Oh, you mean the place with the gold street and the pearly gates?" "Nope, that's hell." "Doesn't it make you upset with them to use your name like that?" "Nope, we're just happy they screen out the folks who would leave their best friends behind." Heaven is a place where you'll see your dogs. Okay, now we'll start the sermon, which is not really a sermon. It is, wrong way. This started out, the division between church and state has been in the news quite a bit lately, particularly in Florida. There's some things going on, so I found this little presentation. This is by Prager University, and we'll
Almost everyone has heard of the doctrine of the separation of church and state. Most Americans believe that it's in the United States Constitution. But there is no such phrase in the Constitution, and there never was, for a simple reason. The Founding Fathers never intended for church and state to be completely separate. They saw religion, specifically religions based on the Bible, as indispensable to the moral foundation of the nation they were creating. So where does that phrase come from? It comes from one brief letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Association in 1802, at the end of a very long sentence in which Jefferson affirms his conviction that religious belief should be a private matter and that the government should not interfere with such matters. He uses the phrase, building a wall of separation between church and state. And that's where the phrase lived, undisturbed, lost in Jefferson's voluminous correspondence for almost 150 years. But more on that in a moment. First, let's discuss what the Constitution actually does say about religion and its role in public life. The answer is found in the First Amendment to the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion while prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It's plain what those words mean. The federal government could not establish a national religion, the common practice in Europe. The United States was going to be different. Americans would be free to follow the religion of their choice. But James Madison first proposed what eventually became the First Amendment. His original wording was that no religion shall be established by Congress. But that language was later modified after it was pointed out that this might be taken to mean that the government, including the state governments, had no interest in religion at all. The founders did not want this. As George Washington said in his farewell address, religion and morality are indispensable supports of our political prosperity. Washington's view remained the nation's view throughout the 19th century and into the 20th, but that changed in 1947. In that year, in the case of Everson versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 decision that under the First Amendment, neither a state nor the federal government could pass laws which aid one religion, aid all religions, or prefer one religion over another. For the first time in American history, the First Amendment was not only about the prohibition of establishing a national religion, it was also about not giving any encouragement to any religion. The modern strict separation view was born. And where did the 5 justices look for support for their argument? Not the Constitution, because there was nothing in the Constitution to help them, but to that one phrase Thomas Jefferson wrote back in 1802. How ironic that the author of the Declaration of Independence, which recognizes the proposition that human beings have inalienable rights from their creator and not from government, was now being used to separate religion from the public square. For Jefferson and the other founders, religion was central to the entire American project. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are just 2 of countless examples where the government acknowledges its debt to God. As the famously liberal Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas wrote in the case of Zorak versus Clausen just 5 years after the Everson decision, we are a religious people whose institutions presuppose a supreme being. The founders would certainly have agreed. Following Everson, the nation's moral infrastructure began to crack, at first slowly and then more rapidly. In 1962, the Supreme Court struck another blow. It ruled in Engel versus Vitale that a generic school prayer violated the court's new definition of the First Amendment. Listen to the words of that school prayer. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen. The prayer was not specific to Christianity or to any religion. Since then, the separation of church and state metaphor has been used to remove God and religion piece by piece from American public life. Are we a better society for it? It's hard to argue that we are. Almost every cultural and ethical indicator, marriage rates, birth rates, the number of Americans giving to charity, has declined since God and religion have faded from American life. Meanwhile, children without fathers in their lives, behavioral problems in schools, and crime have gone up dramatically, and all because of one vote in one court case based on one sentence in one letter. On such things do nations and history turn. I'm John Eastman, professor of law at Chapman University and a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute for Prager University.
This video was made possible through a generous donation by the Boyd family.
Thoughts? Prager University is not a university. It is a conservative, basically idea mill that keeps churning out propaganda. Prager University has been invited to run the curriculum in Florida. This is the type of material they are giving their kids. Let me give you some examples. Here's a quote from one of the things that the Prager University is giving to Florida junior high and senior high students. Israel is the only country in the Middle East that does not oppress its minority populations. That's their literal quote. Climate change deniers are tantamount to Jewish resistance fighters who rose up against the Nazis. Climate change deniers are tantamount to Jewish resistance fighters heroically rising up against the Nazis. The British colonists who ruled the Indian subcontinent were benevolent reformers trying to save indigenous people from their own harmful traditions. This is the kind of thing they are teaching the students over what education professors and the basically education commissions in Florida have tried to teach, and might I say in Ohio have tried to teach. The same thing. They are like ALEC. They are spreading across the country. Oklahoma is the next one to be using Prager. Similar content can be found in its product line aimed at grade school children. In one Prager University Kids video, 2 cartoon characters travel back in time to listen to Christopher Columbus dispute his legacy of violence and subjugation. The place I discovered was beautiful, Columbus says, but it wasn't exactly a paradise of civilization, and the native people were far from peaceful. He then defends his enslavement of the region's indigenous. Slavery is as old as time and has taken place in every corner of the world. I have a copy of that video, but I don't really have time to put it. I guess I would have time now to put it all on. But it's a cartoon video meant for elementary kids. That slavery is something that happened in history, which it's true, it always has happened in history. That doesn't excuse it or make it right. The indigenous people in the Americas did have wars among themselves, and that's true, but that doesn't justify Columbus coming in and basically exterminating 90% of the indigenous population. All right, here's another one. In another PragerU Kids video, an animated Booker T. Washington absolves 2 white children of any guilt they might feel about slavery and the broader treatment of black people in America. Quote, future generations are never responsible for sins of the past, says Washington, shortly after falsely distinguishing the United States as one of the first places on earth to outlaw slavery. And let me throw in a little interesting tidbit there. After the Revolution and the Constitution was written, and actually he was correct, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. All of the Founding Fathers, if they weren't atheists, did believe in a supreme being, but they knew what would happen if that supreme being was involved in the daily life of the people. That kind of comes from the history that they were educated with. They were all very educated people. They studied, for instance, St. Augustine, who wrote a book, City of God, who talked about the temporal city and the earthly city and the heavenly city, or the city of God. How the temporal city was to learn from the heavenly city and to make earth into a heavenly city. But the two were not synonymous. The two were not the same. That kind of went into the Pope. If you look at who the position of the Pope in history, the Catholic Church basically was the temporal city and the heavenly city at the same time. The Pope organized governments, overthrew rulers, ran the world as the Pope saw fit according to the rules of the Catholic Church. And that included many that we're familiar with: subjugation of women, tithing, etc. What happened as a result of that with the Reformation, and just shortly before the Reformation, the leaders, the kings, the powers that be said, we're not going to live under the control of the Pope. We're going to take over the church ourselves. What was one example of that? Britain, King George, the Anglican Church. King George, or the current king, is the leader of the Anglican Church. Church and state are one thing. You pay taxes in England. Actually, you pay taxes in Sweden and Germany if you belong to a church. The state collects taxes and gives it to the church. That was what the American revolutionaries were against. They did not want a state religion. However, the Constitution does not say that the states have to do one thing or another. All 13 colonies at the beginning had their own state religions. Delaware, Pennsylvania, the Quakers, Each one of them had their own religion, and as time went along, they began to loosen the constraints on who could worship and who could not worship. The Puritans basically were executing people who were against the Puritan faith. An interesting change was after the Revolution. The 5 southern colonies that were becoming states, they disestablished or canceled the Anglican Church as the state church for each of their colonies. You know why? Because Britain, far before the United States, outlawed slavery. The Anglican Church, as an arm of the government, outlawed slavery and said slavery was not a good thing. What happened to the 5 southern colonies who wanted to keep slavery? They threw out the Anglican Church because the Anglican Church did not support their beliefs on slavery. All this stuff ties in together and just kind of follow along a little bit. All right, so that's Prager is basically twisting, they're taking the basic truth and twisting it and using it, and becomes basically a propaganda arm, just like we've seen over and over and over again. And the state is allowing this. The state is pushing it. The same thing is happening in Ohio. We've talked about this before. The first thing you have to do is indoctrinate the children. And Prager University actually says that is doctrine. That is doctrination. That is a good thing. They don't look as in indoctrination as being a bad thing. They don't say propaganda, but they defend sending the information to our kids that they want them to believe the way they should believe. And this is the way they think the kids should believe. And they do not give them the opportunity to believe any other way. Teachers and educators are leaving Florida in droves because of the inhospitality of the school systems that are being forced to by state control. Okay. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution states that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office, public trust, or any other occupation in the United States, meaning there will be no official state religion. That was basically Article 6 of the Constitution, and it says specifically, no religious test. You can't have to be a Protestant to be in the Congress. You can't have to be a Catholic to do this or that or anything else. You all remember what happened when John F. Kennedy was elected president. Nobody thought that could happen because there was a lot of anti-Catholic prejudice at that time. And what happens when you give local constituencies control is they can set up any kind of laws that they want. They can exclude anybody they want, and that's what's happening in Florida. That is the reason we have a national constitution. That's the reason we have a national Bill of Rights. And we have a Supreme Court, which is also being affected by this. Okay, talk about the City of God. One thing I want to remember is with the Anabaptist tradition, the Reformation basically, and King George, they also, Luther was the basic instigator of the Reformation, and Luther talked about the 2 kingdoms, the kingdom of God and the kingdom of man, and how they should remain separate. Some people took that to heart, which is the Anabaptists, which is the Mennonites, the Amish, and the Brethren, Church of the Brethren. The Anabaptists basically completely separated religion from public life. They did not vote. They did not hold public office. They did not take an opinion on any kind of public hearing that was going on. And they asked for exemption from certain taxes. And that still holds true today with the Amish. The Brethren and the Mennonites are a little more lax on the involvement because they see the importance of it being involved in public life. But the Anabaptists are still the peace churches, the churches who refuse to serve in the military as combatants. They do not refuse to serve, and they serve as medics and non-combatant people all the time, but they refuse to take another life. That's their statement. Okay. The Jefferson letter of the Wall of Separation, that was a letter written to a Baptist congregation that was being discriminated against in the state of Virginia, where Jefferson was from. And that was his statement to that church, that he would defend them not to have to put up with any laws or ordinances that forced them to do something against their religious conviction. These were Baptists, and Jefferson was not a Baptist. But if you're familiar with Jefferson's history, he actually wrote his own New Testament. Are you familiar with that? Jefferson's New Testament only had the quotations from Christ. It did not have any of the commentary. So it was a considerably shorter New Testament. So Jefferson believed in a creator. He believed in a God. He also believed that every man was created as an individual free person. But we all know what happens to your beliefs when your feelings and your emotions are involved in them. He had a girlfriend, Sally Hemings, who was his slave, who bore him multiple children, who he took to France with him, brought back from France, and did not free Sally. I don't know, maybe she was freed. I don't have the exact information. When he died, he may have freed her in his will, but he did not free her during her lifetime. She remained a slave. And I think her children were freed after his death. George Washington, another example, said slavery was not a good thing. Although in the Constitution, black people were considered 3/5 of a person as far as a vote goes. Compromise is part of democracy. Compromise is part of getting along. We saw the movie Lincoln, if you came to our presentation of that. Lincoln also compromised. He was willing, the proclamation of independence, or the proclamation that freed the slaves, only applied to the southern states. The northern states had to free the slaves on their own, which they did do. And that was the question, because Tennessee and Kentucky were kind of in the middle. They never actually joined the Confederacy, but they never actually joined the Union either. So the slaves were not freed there until later, until the amendment was passed. So all of these things have compromises. Nothing can be done exactly the way you want it to be done. But that's the way that democracy works. And it should be, by power should go to the people. So, another little problem that I ran into with the wall of separation with church and state is the Catholic Church is still in a situation that's causing problems, and I just throw this in as a little bit of information. The Catholic Church sponsors many hospitals all over the nation. Hospitals are in financial difficulty because nobody wants to pay for services they don't need. Every hospital has their own MRI. Every hospital has every service that you can imagine. All those services cost money. That's the reason when you go to the hospital and get a Tylenol, it costs you $10, because they have to pay for the MRIs and the services. Dark County, Wayne Hospital, the 4 top money earners there are the 2 surgeons and the 2 OBGYNs. Each of those gentlemen, and they are all gentlemen at the present, gets $500,000 a year as their base. So $2 million come off the income of Wayne Hospital before any expenses, other expenses are paid, before anything else is done. When I was there, which was like 5 years ago, Wayne, who was the CEO of Wayne, his salary was like $280,000. That all comes off the top before you pay for anything else. It turns out people don't want to pay those kind of money, and what happened with the doctors, they set up their own independent service facilities. So instead of going to a hospital to have your surgery done, you could go to an independent surgery center run by the doctors, not affiliated with the hospital. And it turns out that many of these things can be done saving money. It used to be when you had a baby, you stayed in the hospital for 7 days, basically on bed rest. It turns out nature didn't intend women to have to stay in bed for 7 days. Now having a baby is an outpatient service, unless there's a complication. You come in, you have the baby, and you leave. Surgeries are an outpatient basis. I had my hip replaced a couple of years ago. Came in at 5 in the morning and left at 2 in the afternoon. Who would imagine you can have a hip or a joint or a major surgery like that and walk out of the hospital a few hours later? That costs hospitals a huge amount of money because they get paid a fortune to keep people overnight in the hospital. And it costs a fortune to pay nurses, dietary, x-ray, all the ancillary services that go along with that. So, because these hospitals are losing money, lots of hospitals in rural areas are closing. You can hear about that on the news. And lots of hospitals now are closing because of the anti-abortion thing. They are afraid to keep their OBGYN sections open because they're afraid they're going to be sued for doing some kind of mistake. So they're being bought up by other hospitals. Who's buying them up? Catholic hospitals. And what's happening? Catholic hospitals that used to have the Good Heart or the Saint's name or whatever are changing their name as they merge with other hospitals. They're becoming generic names, the Hospital of Health or whatever. And what do? They still keep, because the Catholic hospital owns the hospital, they still keep the Catholic practices, but they don't tell you the Catholic practices. If you go to the Catholic services in California that have bought up many hospitals, go to their website, it will not tell you that the hospital will not do a tubal ligation. A lot of women, when they have a baby, and particularly a cesarean, they're already open, they're already on the operating table, the surgeon goes in and ties off the tubes, so the lady is basically sterilized. It's simple, it's easy to do, it's non-complicated, and it's very responsibly priced when you're doing it at the same time as you have a cesarean. You can't have that done in a Catholic hospital. They will not do tubal ligations, they will not sterilize it. So women who do not know that go to the hospital, they get their cesarean, they say, I'd like to have a tubal, and the surgeon, like an hour before they have their birth, says, oh, we don't do that here. It's too late to change, it's too late to go to another hospital. Now they have to make a separate outside appointment at one of these independent surgical centers and have it done, and sometimes insurance pays for it, sometimes it doesn't. That's one of the complications that's going on. Another one is ectopic pregnancies. When you go to a Catholic hospital, there's a big problem with an ectopic pregnancy because they do not want to do an abortion on that fetus, even though it would kill the mother if it stayed out there. It has to be, the mother's life has to be in danger before they will do an abortion. And there are women now who are in extremis, who are being, basically their lives are being put in danger because the hospital will not provide that service because it is a Catholic hospital. We can go on and on. Remember the 10-year-old girl in Ohio that was pregnant? You imagine forcing a 10-year-old girl to have a baby. She had to go to Indiana to get her abortion. Of course, now in Indiana, that's illegal as well. So that's the problem with the separation of church and state. It's not just a philosophical, out in the sky decision that we can talk about on a calm Sunday afternoon. It affects real people's lives and causes real damage to people when the state and the church become mingled. And that is the problem with Prager University and the conservative interpretation, in my opinion, is they say they are for freedom of religion, but if the satanic worshipers tried to have a church service in a school or in a church, you would see an outcry like unbelievable. If the Hindus or the Buddhists or the Muslims try to do the things for church education in a school that the Christians are allowed to do, then all of a sudden they're not so much for it. And we saw that in the Texas case that we talked about last week, where the Texas state says you cannot have an abortion, and that's illegal. But then when the woman who was working for the state government had an ectopic pregnancy and was having problems and needed that, then all of a sudden the state wasn't going to pay for it, and the state said she should have had an abortion on her own. She should have gone out of state. It doesn't matter which way they want to go, they will always take the view that they defends them, no matter how hypocritical it is. So, comments?
Tim, I'm glad you went into the separation of church and state and what support it has from the Constitution, because I really didn't know until this summer all the ins and outs of it. And I would have to say that just as with the abortion issue, even though I like to see presidents appoint liberal to the Supreme Court, and I like what the Roe versus Wade decision, and I like this decision that they made in 48. I personally like it. But Scalia, when he was on the court, he used to say that the court is not a legislating body, and so justices like him, they say that the Constitution should be interpreted literally, and that you shouldn't do inventive decisions. And I will have to admit that even though I was for Roe versus Wade and I'm for this 48 decision, I still am very uncomfortable with 9 guys and women who are not elected, who are appointed by the president, and who stay in as long as they want to, deciding whether, in their Constitution says this or that, and they use inventive thinking to decide. And I think, in my humble opinion, Roe versus Wade was inventive, and this one was inventive. If you go strictly, so I'm a little bit, even though I will be the first to admit, I was glad when Roe versus Wade was decided. And if I would have known more about this 48 decision, and I do now, thanks to you, I would have been for that too. I was only 3 years old then, so I would have been for it anyway. Later on, I would have been for it. That being said, I kind of can see Scalia's point, and I'm concerned about, I have a concern about the Supreme Court making these inventive decisions. You're sort of stretching, you hear about stretching the truth, but they're stretching what the constitutional amendments say to make a decision. And I can see where that could end up in trouble someday.
2 points. We can go back and read the Second Amendment again. What does the Second Amendment say? The right to bear arms shall not be abrogated, except for it has to be a well-regulated militia. Have they stretched the point when anybody can own any gun? Because these people do not belong to any militia unless it's a right-wing, anti-American militia. That to me is the same hypocrisy of saying, when we want to stretch the rules, we can stretch the rules as far as we want. When you want to stretch the rules, you can't stretch the rules. The Second Amendment does not say everybody in the country can own any kind of a gun. And personally, if everybody wanted to have a flintlock musket, that would be fine with me. The second point is, the Supreme Court is appointed as a representative government. It's not just the president who appoints them, it is the president who picks them and the Senate who approves them.
That's true.
The problem we ran into is Barack Obama picked lots of people, and the Senate refused to have a hearing to see those people. The Senate refused, the Republican Senate refused to investigate or have a hearing for any Democratic nomination. As soon as they took over and they had a Republican president, they jammed through 3 and 4 and all kinds of people who are not even qualified. You can read, and we'll do the history maybe sometime of Kavanaugh and some of these other people. They were not investigated. The FBI investigations were truncated. They were not allowed to complete their investigations, and any objection to them was overruled. So this is the same thing in any third world country where the government in power basically rams through what they want to get through. That is not American democracy. That is not respect for your opposition, respect for the minority. When the Senate says we are not going to have a hearing and we refuse to have a hearing for your legitimately put forth candidate for the Supreme Court and they were just betting that the election would change circumstances, and it did. And that's our only hope, is to go back to the ballot box and change the situation, to change the legislative population. But how hard is that to do when you have gerrymandering? You might be interested to know, because the Amendment 1 was defeated, and any amendment can be put onto the Constitution of Ohio with a 51% majority in 44 counties. The next amendment that's being proposed is to set up an anti-gerrymandering commission, to where politicians will not set up legislative districts. That will be on the ballot, not this November, but in the coming November. They are already in the process of gathering signatures to set up an independent, bipartisan, with Republicans and Democrats and independents, commission to set up legislative districts. The Republican legislature, in the last session, the Supreme Court of Ohio said the districts you set up are not legal. You gerrymandered them. The legislature said, up yours, we don't care, we're keeping them. The Supreme Court of the United States said, it's not legal, but I don't know what else to do, so you go ahead and have an equal vote on these gerrymandered districts. Everybody is in collusion. Everybody is saying might makes right. The end justifies the means. We all know what the end will be if that continues. All right, we're definitely out of time now.
And just real quickly.
Yes.
As Ty pointed out, I found it very interesting So when you have a conservative legislature, as in Florida, and a conservative governor, okay, it makes no difference because the states, as you point out, are free to do that. And they are indeed indirectly promoting one religion over another. And they will exclude other religions and perspectives in their curriculum. And it's so easy to do. And so I'm not sure what the solution is. I know Ty has pointed out a number of times with this that democracy is not the perfect system, but it's the same as playing out in the Supreme Court. Can you strictly remove politics from court decisions? And if you can't, then you have to, I believe, address the more fundamental and foundational issues. Who appoints them? How long do they serve? And then if they're serving on a term, might that contamination be at the whim of the latest political decisions? And so that's a very difficult question, I believe. But that separation I found very interesting. And my last point, and we need to move on, is the John Eastman has presented this with Prager, the same that is recently been indicted
Yes.
in two major court cases, the state of Georgia as well as U.S. Department of Justice.
Yes.
He is the same person.
I think,
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's, to me, that's the genius of the American Revolution, the genius of the American founding fathers. They knew there's a contradiction. They know there's a conflict. Augustine knew it back before the Renaissance happened. The heavenly city and the temporal city. They're in conflict. One should enlighten the other, and the other should help on the other. And that's what our founding fathers tried to do. They tried to keep the church and state separate. They said everybody should believe in a higher power. Everybody should believe that our rights are given to us as individuals for everyone. But they also made the Constitution a flexible document that grows with the times. They did not want any one particular party or any one particular group to take power in total. We talked about this before. Washington served 2 terms, and then he could have served 3 terms or 4 terms. He voluntarily retired and said it's time for democracy to work. Democracy works as long as it's the way the founding fathers set it up, is to have a balance of powers where the majority can have its way, but it has to respect the rights of the minority. That's what we're losing. Anytime these people become a majority, they lose all respect for the rights of the minority. That's all people are asking. And that's all any liberal would ask. They do not say we should outlaw the Republican Party. They do not say that you can't be a Republican or that Republican principles are important. They say they need to be discussed and people need to be educated to the total fact, not propagandized, not given a filtered idea of what's going on. And you can see from the Prager thing and the quotes I made and the cartoons that they're showing kids, that is literally propaganda. It's very easy to see. It's very easy to see. And unfortunately, conservatives think that when you tell people that you have to have an open mind and make a choice based on the facts, they consider that to be propaganda. So there is a struggle going on for the heart and soul of the country, and we do not have the end in sight yet. Okay, now I'm going to shut up. Okay, let's see. Offering. If you have something, please share. If you need something, please take. And we're going to hear A Summer Place. interested to know, at Lonnie Valentine's funeral, Derek was the presiding minister. They actually have, I don't even understand their terms. They have like 4 or 5 people up there that took turns. But that was one of the things they recited, was the doxology that we use, which I thought was very interesting. Closing hymn is 122, Sound Over All Waters. Sing out the war vulture and sing in the dove. Interesting lyrics in a lot of these songs that we need to pay attention to. All right, Distinguishing the Chalice, We All Emerge by Eric Williams. We all emerge from dwell within, are transformed by and called back to love. May your mind be humbled before this mystery. May your heart grow hopeful by it. May you be sustained by this love always. And our postlude is Tennessee Waltz. This week. I'm not sure when the horse show is, and I'm not sure if their horse show in Dark County, I've never made it to the right one, does the adult gated, 3-gated, 5-gated Tennessee walkers. But the Tennessee Waltz played at a far faster tempo. If you've seen the Tennessee Walkers rack on around the track, that is a pretty amazing sight. It's just like sitting in a rocking chair. And our between the ears, I don't know if you can see it very well, there is a rainbow up here between the ears. So there are donuts back there, and coffee, hot water, and there's instant coffee to make coffee. And there's ice cubes for lemonade if you'd like that. So have a good week. Enjoy the fair. This may be the day to go. It's going to be in the 80s today, and all the rest of the week it's going to be in the 90s. It's going to be hot and sticky for the rest of the week. So if you want to go to the fair, today might be the day. And the races are, the harness races are tonight. Racing Rebel is, I have part ownership in, will be racing tonight, and I'm a Trick Magnet is another one I have an interest in, will also be racing tonight. So good luck